Okay, we'll get started. The projector is warming up, but those of you online should be able to, at the moment, seeing my opening slide, the history of optical sciences as part of Prism Week 2022. I'm honored to have been asked to give a talk on this subject, presumably because I'm old and I've been here long enough to know something about the history of this place. And I eagerly and quickly said I would be happy to give this talk. And then I began to think about what I wanted to say. And let's see what's here. There we go. In short, I think a more accurate title is more like a brief and very incomplete history of optical sciences at the U of A. In 1 hour's time or 50 minutes, there is no way that I can do justice to and cover all aspects of the history of this I say this place. Notice I've got optical sciences in quotes. Technically, we've been known with 3 different names, and that'll be more obvious as we go through the talk. The Optical Sciences Center, the College of Optical Sciences, and now the James C. Wyant College of Optical Sciences. So this facility has actually had, over the years and decades, 3 different titles. I'm Dr. Mike, and let's get the date up front and center. We were established as a center at the U of A in 1964. The building, the facility actually was dedicated, built and finished in 69, dedicated in 1970. I've been here since 1981, August, as a graduate student, and I've been here ever since. So the first disclaimer, if you do the math, no, I've not been here 57 years, only 40. But that still puts it at about 2/3 of the lifetime of our college. And the fine print basically says, look, any errors, misstatements, untruths, exaggerations, I probably should say lies, tales that are stretched a little bit in my talk are really solely my responsibility. You look up the word history and past events that relate to a particular subject and place, organization. All of those words fit what we're about to describe. Related words, yes, witness. I've been witness to quite a bit of the history here, as have others. I'm not the only one that could give this talk for sure. Anecdotes, tales, and I love the word yarns. There are many tales and stories associated with faculty and students and staff alike. I'll share a couple of those, but I'm not wanting to turn this into a storytelling session. I'll do my best to stick to really the history of optical sciences. Everyone involved here owes a debt of gratitude, a huge debt of gratitude to Tammy Orr. Tammy is responsible for researching and writing and putting out all of the information on our website under OSC history. Her series of articles known as Reflections and so forth are just invaluable if you want to really dig into and learn more about people and the past history. Tammy, we owe you a huge debt of gratitude. And she's listed in our directory as our official volunteer historian. And when you look at the amount of work she's done, it's incredible. One of the reasons I wanted to give this talk was for my own benefit to sort of force myself to go back in time and learn about the very first graduate of optical sciences. His name is Jim Mayo, James Mayo III, but his contribution goes way beyond just showing up and earning the first master's degree. Let's see here. I want to take us back. Let's hope the sound works. If not, well, let's see. October 1957. The U.S. and the Soviet Union are entrenched in the Cold War. And all of a sudden, unbeknownst to anyone, this sound showed up on shortwave radios coming from outer space. You're literally hearing the beep, beep, beeps of Sputnik 1. And I'll let it play for a few more seconds. You can actually hear the Doppler shift coming up as the satellite passed overhead, and this was recorded. It literally caught everybody off guard, including a young Jim Mayo, who was a high school student at the time in Memphis, Tennessee, loved astronomy. But literally, with the beep, beep, beeps that we're hearing, the space race was on. What does that have to do with optical sciences? A lot, actually, as it turns out. At the time, and there are people like Bob Shannon that know a whole lot more that actually was working at the time, but spy satellites were being built, designed with optical engineering. But as Jim Mayo very aptly realized, the optics was not good enough, one might say, and the country as a whole, to get serious about moving into the space race, needed much more talent, as in people who have been trained in optics and optical engineering. Make no mistake, the University of Rochester's Institute of Optics existed at the time, but it was pretty clear to not just Mayo, but others within the Air Force in particular, that more talent needed to be developed, trained, and long story short, in 1964, as a second lieutenant at Wright Pat, he was tasked to, quote, massively expand optics training and education programs for the military and civil service engineers and scientists. And he was the first enrolled student to enroll at Optical Sciences in 1967, first graduate with a master's in 68. From his personal story, and obviously I'm not going to read all of this, but just what's in bold, he says, I remember it like it was yesterday. The colonel calls him up and says, get to my office. We've got a chance to truly expand and develop this business of optics training within the country. And at that point in time, it's my understanding that Aiden Meinel had already spent 6 months putting a document together entitled Proposal to Establish an Optical Sciences Center at the University of Arizona. At that point in time, Meinel was a well-known astronomer, and a lot of ways to say this, but had a lot of clout and was well recognized as someone that knew what he was talking about. And so that is basically how the Air Force and what would become Air Force funding to establish the center here all came together. Not only that, look at the next sentence. Not only was Dr. Meinel willing to take military service students at his new center, he was actively seeking DoD support. And that all came true. And so if you've heard some rumors to the effect that this was the result of Air Force funding, it very much was, and DoD funding as well, from what I understand. The Air Force Institute of Technology began its response to the U of A to include the center as being officially approved under their programs for graduate studies to be able to fund the place. And of the first 42 graduates, 12 were United States Air Force officers. So it's not just a coincidence that we see Captain Jim Mayo here receiving his master's degree with his uniform on. He flat out says, because this is all of his writing, the Optical Sciences Center was the true miracle of the 1960s. So the center continued to build up the faculty and prepare for student onslaughts of 67 and 68. This in and of itself posed logistical problems, since at that time there were no buildings. It was one of the most exciting times of my life, Jim says. Fast forward, today, students in the audience will recognize perhaps that one of our scholarships has been named in his honor, and he was in 2018 named our Alumnus of the Year. He himself went on to have an amazing career in optics. Won't get into the nitty-gritty details, but look at the very last bullet point that I put in. He was instrumental, come to find out, at Kirtland Air Force Base to help develop laser guide star technology. So we sort of take it for granted today that that's being done in the realm of astronomy. It, as in the Air Force use of it, predates and the technology that he and his teams developed have become, declassified and have found their ways into the world of guide stars for astronomy. The first director, I think we all know, was Dr. Aiden Meinel. His official portrait hangs in our building. Picture of him in the upper right corner that we may have all seen. You may not know that, in fact, his wife Marjorie, also a Dr. Meinel, was also a very accomplished astronomer. And the two of them, I think it's fair to say, literally until their dying days, worked together at the Jet Propulsion Lab, still contributing, still publishing papers on large mirror space-based telescope designs. They were, from what I understand, a team that both contributed to this business of optical engineering. This picture sits in our hallway. I've taken the liberty to call it mirror sitting. I love this picture. It's Aiden sitting on a mirror. The credit for the picture goes to one of the first faculty members here, Steve Jacobs. I have since learned from Don Loomis, who is a retired master optician from Optical Sciences, this was a staged photo. Probably no surprise. Aiden didn't really make a habit of sitting on mirror blanks. But he is shown here using a ring spherometer to measure the sag to get the radius of curvature of that surface. For the sake of time, I cannot break down all the details of Aiden's life. So this is from one of the references at the bottom, a paper that's been published showing a timeline. Some of the highlights, though, he was tasked by the government at national level to find a suitable site for the first new national observatory. And so we all may know that he founded Kitt Peak, but he literally went around the West, camped out at various mountaintop sites, made measurements of the sky quality, and decided that Kitt Peak was where the National Observatory should be built, southwest of Tucson. That was in 1958. Here's a picture that has been published. Group of scientists, March 5th, 58, meeting with Native Americans from the Tohono O'odham Nation to sign the lease to build what we now call and know as Kitt Peak. And Aiden is standing on the very far right in this picture. It goes on. He has a tremendously storied career. Retired from the U of A after establishing, well, so back up. He became the first director, left Kitt Peak. He was the first director of Kitt Peak. That didn't last all that long. And I don't know the details. Never really asked. But after 2 years, he came back to campus and became the first director of Stewart Observatory. And in hindsight, that was a gift to us, probably. If he might have stayed at Kitt Peak and might have spent his career there, and this place may not have happened. I'm just conjecturing. But became the first director of Stewart Observatory, and then got involved in finding Air Force funding, literally to build our facility right across the street. And I was present for the dedication ceremony, where our building became officially known as the Meinel building here on campus. And that was a very great day. The gentleman at the podium is good grief. No, it's not Luke. It's Dick Powell. I'm sorry, drew a blank. It was Dick Powell, our director at the time. Yes. And you'll notice Marjorie is using a cane. I mean, they were, getting up in age at that point. And but I had the good fortune of, not really getting to know them personally, but interacting, at least seeing them in the hallways on occasion. I show this partly because I love that picture of Aiden. Notice he's got a bolo tie on. In bold again, a quote from Jim Wyatt. The Meinel building, which houses the U of A College of Optical Science, is named for him. Quote, this place would not be here without him, said Optical Sciences Dean James Wyatt. I would not be here, the optical companies would not be here, and a lot of developments in astronomy would not have happened. That's pretty heady stuff. Quite a tribute. Again, from Wyatt, he'd come up with these ideas and then go home and actually build the stuff. He was an amazing guy. I didn't realize he was that much of a hands-on guy, but then I guess I should have assumed that. Wyatt said Meinel never stayed at one task very long. Quote, he liked to start things, but he didn't like to run them. So he very much started this place, and he passed away at age 88. Another bit of tribute to him is from John Grievenkamp. So much of what we accomplish is by standing on the shoulders of giants. How very true. In the fields of optics and astronomy, Aiden Meinel is truly a giant, said John Grievenkamp, professor at the College of Optical Sciences. Aiden is single-handedly responsible for making Tucson, Arizona, and the U of A one of the major centers of optics and astronomy in the world. It all started with him and his vision for what could be done. He goes on to say, I know that Aiden was very proud of what the Optical Sciences Center has grown to become. He set a standard that we all must strive to live up to. I suspect that his advice to all of us would be to know the hurdles before us, but to not fear them and to just go and get it done. It seems that this is the way he lived his life. One of the alumni from Optical Sciences, who himself has had a very storied and wonderful career at the Jet Propulsion Lab, is Jim Breckenridge. And some of you may have seen Jim wandering the hallways over the last decade, let's say. It turns out he gave a colloquium a few years ago about, at that time, Aiden Meinel, and about a book that he was in the process of writing. And come to find out, the book is been announced on Amazon, and you too, like I just did, can order a pre-publication copy. What a great title, with stars in their eyes. And notice it's not just about the life of Aiden, it's about the lives of Aiden and Marjorie. And again, their devotion to each other. This is from the foreword written by, again, Jim Wyatt. He says, I believe this book will become a must-read for those wishing to understand more fully the long, storied history of not only the Optical Sciences Center that started with the incredible vision of one man, Aiden Meinel, but also for those interested in astronomy and so forth. And frankly, I'm looking forward to learning more about the relationship that Aiden and Marjorie had, both, as a married couple and as scientists. Okay, so notice I hadn't presented an outline of my talk. I don't like outlines, but the plan here is I want to go through. We'll look at the evolution of the facility, the buildings that took place within the context of and in the timeframes of the directors and the two deans that we have had. So location. Again, this picture hangs in the fourth floor hallway. If you look carefully and if you know the U of A campus, you'll not recognize anything here. This is probably, well, maybe early 60s, I'm just guessing. The facility in the very back right corner is the football field, minus all of the upper decks that have been built since then. So we're looking south towards the Santa Ritas, and you'll notice there is no McHale Center. McHale Center was built and dedicated in 72. McHale Center was first used for the 72-73 basketball season. And so no McHale, big parking lot with great cars. Construction begins, and we all know, if you've been in the building, why there's a big hole in the ground, because the optical shop is literally 3 stories underground, and there's evidence of that. The building was completed in 1969, and here's a color photo that shows it being built. And I had not seen this photo until I really did the research for this talk. There it is. And here's what I saw when I arrived in August of 1981. The Optical Sciences building, complete. We know that as sort of the central core part of our facility today, and I'll explain where the East Wing and the West Wing came from and at what times they were built. But this original building was dedicated in 1970. The parking lot to the right is now where the West Wing exists. And again, Macleod is nowhere to be seen in this picture. Notice the front porch. The front porch is now the roof of our library. So if that roof cover, it looks a little strange, like maybe it was an actual roof of an outdoor area. It was. And there it is in the front corner of the building, again, where our library is now. They just enclosed that space and turned it into our library space. That was the main entrance into the building. And there was a lobby inside that no longer exists. And that remodeling, if I recall correctly, took place at the same time when the East Wing was built. Someone might correct me on that. So the approach that I've decided to use for much of the rest of the talk is as follows. Well, I want to show us each of the directors in sequence, the faculty that they were responsible for hiring, and then a slide that talks about their notable accomplishments. Again, the challenge of putting this talk together was who to include and who not to include for the sake of time. We could pick any one of these faculty names. We could pick any of the names that you're about to see and probably talk for at least a half an hour of what and how they contributed to optical sciences. So I want to at least mention names. For most of you, for many of you, these are just names, and you may not have ever, personally known these folks, or at least, worked side by side with them. For example, Bob Noble and Roland Schack, the very first two faculty to be hired by Aiden in 1964. Again, there's no facility. Their two hires mark the official beginnings of the Optical Sciences Center. The building, again, completed in 1970. So where did people take classes during those years? 67, 68, 60, Stewart Observatory, across the street. And things were moved over here then from 1970 on. Notice I've got Aiden's time as our first director from day zero, quote unquote, to 1973. Little nebulous as to, when day one should officially be, but obviously with his proposal, that might be one way to mark his beginning with optical sciences. And a year later, Steve Jacobs was hired from TRG. TRG was the company that Gordon Gould ran on Long Island, and they were, along with the folks at Bell Labs, in the race to make a laser. And I had one of my first classes, well, both from Roland Schack and Jacobs. And Steve loved to tell that story. And I regret to this day that I did not record it. Steve passed away a few years ago. He told an amazing version of it. It caught everybody off guard the day when they opened up the newspaper and some guy on the West Coast named Theodore Maiman had made the first working laser. I would have to use pretty flowery language to describe it as Steve did, but it was always a great story when Steve told it. And I'll just mention this because I can. Of all the names that you're going to see over the next few slides, the only two from what I remember that I did not know would be Bob Noble and Clarence Babcock. They were not here when I got here in 1981. I've had classes again as others from Roland Schack and Steve Jacobs, Roy Frieden. Roy still comes in and into the building almost on a daily basis. I guess I did not know and ever meet Jim Iyer. Nick Stavridis, absolutely. Peter Bartels, Phil Slater, Bill Swindell, Jack Gaskell, Arvin Marate, Murray Sargent, Bob Shannon, Bill Wolf hired me as a young graduate student, and Marlon Scully. Actually, three. I did not know Scully at all. He had left before I got here, but he was hired as one of the preeminent quantum physicists of the day. And the list actually goes on. I ran out of space. Bernie Sarafin, Francis Turner, and Rick Shoemaker. Sarafin taught a solid state optics here, and I took his course. Shoemaker had a wonderful sort of career with Rick because he essentially had the, well, let me back up. He followed Jack in the second position of associate director for academics, all things academic. And so Rick and I had worked together for many years. I did have a chance to meet Francis Turner in sort of a commemoration ceremony. It was very small, held up in 701 one afternoon. And for some reason, I just thought, I want to meet the gentleman that was considered, if not the father, one of the fathers of thin film technology. He would come from Bosch and Lone, and famous name. So here's a slide entitled Notables under Aiden's name. And I guess I'm pointing out two people here. First of all, in part because we all have seen his work, Don Cohen. He joined OpSci in '65. He was an artist from Australia. I did not realize that. Studied both in London and Paris. This painting that hangs in our building to this day used to hang in the lobby. It's not officially called imaging, but it was Don's version of his conception of how an optical system might form an image. And if you've looked at this, it's optically correct. There's magnification and inversion and reversion and so forth. One side correctly relates to the other in an optical sense. He's also the person who painted the official portrait of Aiden, hangs in the building, and he created the Pyrex glass sculpture in about 1970. That used to, and in fact, the picture, the horizontal picture there, that shows it sitting on the front porch in what now is the library. Okay, I found this picture in the lower left corner, which is really quite amazing. It's Aiden on the left and Don Loomis on the right. Don Loomis was hired by Aiden from Kit Peak. Don is, in my opinion, or from what I understand, one of the greatest opticians the world has known. He still is alive and has his own shop at his house up in the northeast corner of Tucson. I run into him every so often. Amazing stories. But he had a key role in designing our optics test tower and the large optics shop. And there, he and Aiden are sitting, looking down, but we're looking up into the top of the test tower. It's not often you get to see that unless you have access to the shop. Our second director was Peter Franken, and from 74 to 83. So Peter was the director when I got here in 1981. And again, his list of hires is more than notable. Barrett, Willis Lamb, Jim Wyant, Eustace Drejnik. We know him as Stacy Derniak. Angus Macleod, also arguably the father of thin film technology and education in that field. Hyatt Gibbs, Gorserid, George Stegman, Chris Koleopoulos, in case you've ever wondered about the company that Jim Wyant founded, Wyco. Well, the WY is sort of obvious. That's the WY of Wyant. The KO is Chris Koleopoulos. And the two of them founded Wyco. Peter hired Jim Burke, Charlie Falco, and Ursula Gibson as well. He appointed Jack as the director of academic programs and hired people, again, that to some of you, their names don't mean anything. To some of us, wow, what great memories. Floyd Lance, Don Hillman, and Bobby Doss. If you've heard of Bobby Doss, some of you are here that worked with Bobby Doss. I think it's fair to say she put us as students at the forefront. If we needed something to happen, whether it was to make sure we got paid or summer comp or whatever it was related to HR or person, she knew how to make things happen. And I'm not here to say that she did things illegally, but she knew who to call on every corner of campus to make things happen. And she just got things done on behalf of all of us here. We owe a great deal of gratitude and debt to to Bobby Doss over the years. Bob Parks, again, one of the preeminent experts in optical metrology. And Phil Slater was promoted, and then he established some joint professorships. The last bullet is not inconsequential. Put together a JSOP program that provided a huge funding in support to us from the Army and the Air Force for over 20 years. As we all know, it takes contract money to make this place run. It did then, it still does. Bob Shannon was our third director and hired the likes of Nasser, Massoud, Tom Milster, Ewan, John Gravenkamp, and Galina Petrova. There's a picture of a somewhat young looking Bob Shannon, 84 to 92. The East Wing, under construction. And remember that very well because all our teaching labs were there, or were created in that new corner of the building. It has been since remodeled when the West Wing was built. But for the most part, where you find the teaching labs today is where they were built originally in 1988-89. It was in 1989 when we started our undergraduate program. So we had the facility. Let's see here. Oh, there's a mistake in my note here. This is the West Wing under construction, and no, it was not dedicated in 1970. It was dedicated in 2005. But there is a whole lot of us that were here when the West Wing was built. So that's somewhat recent history in the grand scheme of things. I'll switch gears and talk a little bit about Jim Wyant. I just had to put this slide in, and I've decided to title it Neighbors. Jim Wyant and Dr. Mike. Wait a minute, really? If you look carefully, and it may be hard to discern, you're looking at a map of Northwest Ohio, the very northwest corner of Ohio. And the picture on the right is a picture of Jim's hometown, Lyons, Ohio. It's a one-stoplight crossroads. He grew up on a farm. As the crow flies, 17 miles to the southwest is my hometown of Archbold, Ohio. And I found a couple pictures that, if you look very carefully, at least proves that there's more than one stoplight in my town. In fact, there are four. And by the way, this Jim and I love to kind of banter, share this back and forth. If one-upsmanship with our hometown locations. I think my hometown these days has 4 stoplights, a number of restaurants. It's got a weekly newspaper. It's got a radio station, and it's got a McDonald's, a Burger King, and a number of factories. It's a metropolis compared to Lyons, Ohio. But I think we'd all agree, here's where the comparison stops, because the gentleman from Lyons, Ohio has gone on to have a much more storied career than I can ever dream about. And in many ways, all of us sitting here are indebted to his success through the donations and the financial contributions he's made to our college. So hooray for Lyons, Ohio. Okay, I can sum up Jim's success with these pictures. And I was at this celebration. This is his retirement celebration as dean of our first dean of the College of Optical Sciences. You're an important person. You've made it big in Tucson, Arizona, and at the U of A, when upon your retirement, Sean Miller, our current basketball coach at the time, shows up and hands you a signed basketball, and Lute Olson is the guest speaker. And in fact, there they are sitting in the front row listening to Jim speak as well. The gentleman in the blue shirt is Greg Byrne, who was our athletic director at the time. So if you're into basketball, there's Lute. Yeah, that was a big event. Wilbur showed up. Let's see here. Okay, well, all right, I'm missing some slides. How did that happen? I don't know. Who have I left out here? Oh, wow. Well, for the sake of time, that may be okay. By the way, because I do have a couple of extra minutes now, Jim loves to tell this story. Points out that one of his classmates went on to become my second grade teacher. So we were more than neighbors, right? I guess. So thank you, June Yost. for being my second grade teacher and a classmate of Jim Wyatt. You may also know that Jim grew up on a farm, and tragically, his father and grandfather both died on the same day when he was 5 years old. You gotta think about that. And so, growing up, Jim kind of became the man in charge of the farm. And by the time he was in high school, and he was not only going to school, but he was running the farm. And not only running the farm, he raised chickens. And this is a documented, published story, so this is not any exaggeration. The number that's quoted is that he raised upwards of 28,000 chickens at a time. Now, I think in talking to him, they were chicks. And what he would do, he would raise them as chicks, get them to the point where he could take them to the local livestock auctions, Delta and maybe even my town, sell them so that in turn they'd be sold as livestock for other local farmers that would then raise them as chickens and have egg production. And Jim would repeat and make money, again. Obviously, business has been in his blood for a very long time. It did not start with the founding of Wyco. It started with chickens. Great story. But there he is with the dignitaries of the U of A. I truly don't know what happened to some of my slides. I was going to show a picture of the alumni board that hangs in the hallway. And without trying to recount the actual numbers of graduates, it's large. And my title on that slide was Buildings Aside, and quite frankly, even directors and deans aside, even though they've made tremendous contributions, you can argue that and I underlined that, legacy of optical sciences lies with our alumni. No question about that. Whether they left here with a bachelor's degree, a master's degree, a PhD, or all of the above. The legacy of this place, the living legacy of this place exists, I argue, with our alumni. And then the next slide, however, make no mistake, we stand on the shoulders of giants. And these are the two bronze plaques that are now on display in our third floor lobby of Aiden and Jim, with their life stories as well. Had to have a little fun with this. Been titled the next couple of slides, Who? The two pictures on the left, wow, I had a beard and hair at one point. That's me. Yeah, that's me. In the center column, who's up on the top? A young John Gravenkamp. How about down in the bottom? Yes, a young Jim Wyatt. Okay, the big picture to the right, Tom Milster. Taken about 1990. Tom and I, another interesting, started here as graduate students in the same class, 1981. So for sure, Milster could give this talk as well as I can. Okay, on the left, it's a little more challenging. Some of you will know. It's Jose. I should have said, there's a theme here in that these are still folks that are here. So you probably might have a chance of recognizing them. How about the next, the color picture? No. No. Down to the lower right of Jose. It's Ralph Binder. Okay, moving off to more to the right. Yeah, that's a young Nasser. I don't expect anybody to get this next one because I've known this gentleman since day one here. So that's 40 years. And I came across this picture and I was stunned. I would not have recognized a very young Eustace Berniak. That's Stace. Yeah, that's what I said. Wow. Technically, we have 3 Nobel Prize winners that have been associated with optical sciences, but this picture shows the two, Nico Blombergen and Willis Lamb, that actually, physically had offices here and contributed to the center with various talks and seminars and so forth. Both have passed away, but what a great picture showing Peter Likens, U of A president at the time, Nico on the left and Willis on the right. Got to give a shout out, and I apologize to all of the staff that have graced this facility, that continue to work here, that have worked here. But I've singled out one in particular, in part because even as first-year graduate students, you may have seen his plaque. You may have seen evidence of somebody named Manny. And Manny was our first Matt, so to speak. Manny was our first building manager. Manny was the epitome of let's just get it done. If there was an optical table that needed to be moved, Manny would almost try to move it barehanded. If an errand needed to be run, he would jump in our beat up old station wagon at the time and just get it done. He starred in some Western movies too, out at Old Tucson. So, if he looks like he might have been fit to be an actor, he was. He was an optician, but he became our building manager. And I'm just compelled to tell a story. It's been published. Tammy wrote it up. It goes as follows. I knew Manny pretty well, and this was sometime, it doesn't matter when, but it was an afternoon I'll never forget. And I'm standing in the hall, 4th floor here, and there was nobody else within sight except Manny was coming charging down the hall, and he was upset. And it's not, for those of you that knew him, I mean, that was not unusual. He would often get a little agitated, but he seemed really upset that day. I said, Manny, what's wrong? He said, somebody parked a car right out in the middle of the compound. He said, blocking my access to things. He says, I'm gonna go move it. And I remember thinking, wonder how he's gonna pull this off. I thought, this is too good to pass up. So I'm the only person around. I followed him out the back door onto the loading dock. And Manny goes charging off, and he jumps on the old forklift. And he fires up the old forklift. And to my dying day, I absolutely promise you this is a true story. Saw it with my own eyes, and no one else did. He maneuvered the forklift to broadside side of the car and picked the car up with the 2 forks, turned 90 degrees and moved it out, set it down fittingly enough by the dumpster, by the trash dumpster, came back in, shut off the forklift, and declared there, problem solved. The story has a different ending as well, because a little bit later, maybe a year later, one of our students was telling the following tale that they had gotten a parking ticket for parking illegally out behind the back of Optical Sciences. And they went over to Parking and Transportation to argue their case. I didn't park my car there. Someone moved it. The connections were never made, and that's fitting, right? Manny was a wonderful gentleman. And at least this version of the slides ends there. So, quite sure what happened. I thought that was the latest version. Anyway, we have maybe a couple minutes left. I'm happy to take questions. I'm happy to entertain comments from those online, any or all of the above. I don't know if online, if you are able to unmute yourselves and want to make a comment or ask a question or clarify something that I've said. Well, again, there are folks. Yes, right. Yeah, Jose. No, I did not ask permission to show your picture, but it's out there in the public domain, and you really were that much younger and good looking at the time, I guess. Let me tell 2 quick stories about Jack. I was going to do this in lieu of a bunch of bulleted items. Let me tell you 2 very quick stories about Jack. It's August 1981, and I've just graduated from Denison. I've got my bachelor's. I've got a 3.5 GPA, nothing to sneeze at. I had applied to the University of Rochester, don't shoot me, and to the U of A and a couple of other schools. I really wanted to come to Arizona. Don't know why, to this day, I just did. Didn't really want to go and continue on in snow country, having grown up in Ohio. So the letter arrives from Rochester. Oh, happy day. PhD accepted, full scholarship, full ride. Okay, Arizona, come on, I'm waiting. The phone rang a couple days later. Mike, hey, it's Jack Gaskell out here at Arizona. We've got your application, and to be honest, Denison's a small school, 3.5. but we're happy to admit you to the master's program. Are you interested? Yes, Jack, I'm interested. I'll be there. Thank you, Jack. And I mean that in all sincerity, but 2 suitcases and a bicycle in a box and a flight out here, sight unseen, and I've never left. I'm a graduate student. I don't know when, doesn't matter, but I'm in the middle of an RA funding, and I had forgotten, it was all my fault, to somehow submit my timesheet for that pay period, and I did not get paid. Now, at the time, my wife, Judy, was a working English teacher, and I'm a graduate student. We're living paycheck to paycheck. And I somehow missed getting paid, all my fault. What do I do? Oh my gosh, I don't know. So I knocked on the door of Jack Gaskell's office, which ironically is right about where my office is currently. And I say that with a lot of pride. Jack, Mike, what's up? I said, I explained my situation, and he said, well, listen, okay, whatever happened, it's fine. And without thinking, he opens his desk drawer and he pulls out his personal checkbook. And with pen in hand, he says, how much do you need to get you by? And I was stunned, and I couldn't ask for the whole amount. And I blurted out something like $500. And without even saying a word, he filled that check out, handed it to me, and he says, you pay back when you can. So personally, that's, I think, the best tribute I can give Jack Gaskell. But there are so many others and so many wonderful stories about his contributions here. But that's something I keep in my heart and have taken with me ever since. But again, any questions or comments before we really wrap this up? I think there's actually a class coming in here in a few minutes, that we are about education still. What was the nature? Of the faculty? Oh, notice I did list where they had come from. And if that's what you're asking, for example, Bob Shannon came from ITech, Perkin-Elmer. Steve Jacobs came from Gordon Gould's company. The theme, if there was a theme, was that Aiden hired people from industry. He didn't just go out and raid other academic. Rochester was really the only other game in town. So unless you wanted to raid everybody from, pull all the faculty from Rochester, you had to draw from, and Aiden was a master at that, drawing from industry. So they may or may not have been that is actually true. In fact, sure, why not? Pop quiz. This is a very challenging question. Of our faculty over the decades, I think there were 3 that did not have doctorates. And if you know who those 3 are, you really know something about the history of optical sciences. I'll tell you later. But for the most part, everybody did. And that's not what they brought in lieu of that was phenomenal in terms of experience. Other questions?
Where did the East Wing start? Is it like?
Where did the East Wing start? Yeah, I can answer that for sure. If you know where Matt's office is, okay, you'll notice that wall there is brick. That was the outside wall. So let's see, as you're heading towards the East Wing, before you cross that open sort of doorway with brick, and then Matt's office will be on your left, that was an outside door. That was an outside door.
So that whole hallway was
this whole hallway was dirt, outside space. Online, other comments or questions? Oh, sorry, there. Okay, I don't see anything in chat. Yes. Oh, yes. As Dean Koschel points out, good people come from Ohio. I'd be remiss in not pointing out that he's also from Ohio, just the southeastern corner. Yeah, different.
I would just like to say my little town in Indiana doesn't even have a flashing light.
Amber's pointing out that she's from a town even smaller than Lyons, Ohio.
I came here for a master's degree,
And there you are too. See, maybe that's well, if there's a theme that binds all of us here, I think it's that, we've all arrived from different backgrounds and parts of the world these days, and different experiences as students or even newly hired faculty. And I apologize to Tom Koch. I had a couple of slides that show the faculty that have been hired since he's been here, and you know, his work to secure space in the new Grand Challenges Research Building. That is not a small thing. We supposedly will take over 3 floors, and the 2 buildings will be physically connected. We are growing and we continue to expand, and that's also been a theme of what Meinel accomplished, what all the directors accomplished in one form or another, whether it was increased funding, the new buildings, and so forth. You may not know, or you may know that the faculty who was in charge of being the liaison between the contractors that built the West Wing and the U of A and us was John Grievenkamp. And John worked tirelessly, meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting, to bring it all together and make sure that our needs were met with the blueprints that were drawn up. Spent a tremendous amount of time helping us get that West Wing established like we wanted. Nothing's perfect, you know, but we owe a huge amount of gratitude for him. Not to end this on a down note, but the reality is, folks, that in the last year we have lost 4 also of the giants of this place. Within maybe, what is it? Well, summertime, we learned that Angus Macleod had passed away. And, you know, I'd taken my thin films class from him, probably back in 1983, something like that. Jack Gaskell, John Grievenkamp, and you may not know, Phil Slater just died, all within the last 2 weeks. So, you know, keep them in thoughts and prayers, but we carry on, and we've got new faculty, we've got new students continually, the lifeblood of this place, and I've been so proud to be part of it for 40 years. I'll stand here and promise that unless something happens, I will not retire, at least until the Grand Challenges Research Building is built, so I can say I've, you know, seen all 4, or have worked in all 4 of the parts of our building, I guess. So with that, again, other comments, questions?
We all come from very different places, but we all belong
Yeah, Amber makes a good point. We all, in one way or another, we all belong here, and we all have roles to play, and you know, things to learn, and that's all good. Yeah. So yeah, that's all I've got, and I want to thank all of you for your attention and being here.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mike.
Okay.